Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Code with Italians. Today, we're here with someone you might have seen here before. Hey, Chet. Welcome back.
Oh, hello. How are you?
We're doing well. So, today is a bit of a different episode from what we normally do because we normally talk about tech. We talk about coding.
Oh,
We talk
yeah,
about we
I
talked
don't know
about
that.
shapes at some point as well.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I can get into
However,
geometry, but code, I don't know. That's not really my domain.
yeah. Today we invited you because you are a writer, and so what? I mean, you wrote books, so that counts, I think.
I hope
we are
so.
pivoting.
Otherwise, what an incredible waste of time.
So today we're going to be talking about careers and particularly taking a look at your career, how you ended up going from the the tech industry, and just getting out of it. Like what was
Sounds like you made it, right? He made it out.
how
right?
you escaped the gravitational pull
Yes.
of the tech
A lot of
industry.
people are escaping tech right now, but mine was actually voluntary. So
Yeah, I was gonna say on your own terms.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people like Steve Martin as a stand-up comic is a great example. Like a lot of people like to stop at the top. I enjoyed stopping right in the middle. I thought, I've been in the middle for a while, and maybe that's enough of the middle. I'm gonna do something else.
fair enough.
Yeah,
Before
go ahead.
we get started, one sec. I think Ivan has a couple of Ivan things to say.
Yes. Let's do the
usual.
usual being grateful for our audience and reminding that you can subscribe for free to our Twitch stream if you have an Amazon Prime subscription. Uncle Bezos is picking the bill. You can connect your account and you can support us for free. We will be able to make, print things like stickers and gadgets that you will get for free during our giveaways, or if you end up at one of the conferences that we are gonna attend. By the way, the new DroidCon Italy just landed. The final dates are in November, so check out the website, and we will be ready in a few weeks with discount codes. That's also nice. I mean, as usual.
Question mark?
No,
Probably.
I'm just gonna.
We're assuming
so
that
much.
we're very well
we
prepared.
we usually harass them and then they give up and they give us discount codes. So and that's the usual thing.
That works.
So thank you for the support. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And yeah, let's go back. Hola a todos. Gracias Mark por el Ivano. So yes, so I'm very curious because when we heard about you leaving the industry.
Wait, why do I get air quotes for that?
It's a single
I
quote,
left.
though. It's not a double quote.
No, but he did it twice. So yeah.
Wait, so when you do this, is that like double quotes?
Yeah. That's quad quotes. That's like it makes no sense whatsoever.
It's a Kotlin. You know how you type the Kotlin JSON. That's the how is it called? String literal? No, it's not. I don't remember how it's called. But
string literal?
Yeah, probably.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So jokes aside, so I'm constantly in finding balance between I like computers, but I also want to garden more. so when you announced that I'm leaving, I was like, "This is I want to understand more," because he's completely pivoting. So me getting a farm wouldn't be so weird, right? From computers to cattle. So that's also something that I want to explore, because
sure,
it was as far as I remember, it was your passion for long, but also not the main.
The writing or the computer stuff?
That's a good question. So yeah, but before that, Sebastiano,
Yes.
do we want to have a recap? So
Um,
how did Chet ended up here?
I feel like, so being in the screenwriting program, I feel like right now we should have like a montage. We should have like a 2-minute video montage
yeah.
that shows me at various ages working at different companies, doing different things. And then everybody would be caught up and it would be way more entertaining and visually amusing than whatever the hell I'm about to do instead.
We need a cool montage music
Yes.
to go with that.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
But since I haven't put that together, and I probably don't have time to do it in real time, yeah, I can try to give you a really quick CV dump of how I got here. Where do I start? Master's degree in college. We didn't have CS. Got out and got a job in like data communications, networking stuff, working a lot with spreadsheets. Super boring, which I'm actually okay with. Like I did realize that if you get a job that's like okay, you may end up staying there for far too long. If you get a job you hate, it motivates you to figure out what it is you actually want to do instead.
I keep telling this to my wife. Nobody ever actually improved out of love. How many people improved out of hate? I mean, look at the gym. Nobody's like lifting shit like, oh, I love this so much.
Yeah,
no, it's more like I hate this shit, man.
Yep.
I need to do it before. Yeah, so I really can relate.
Yeah, I was like a year into that job. I was like, I got to get the hell out of here. And then I spent the next year figuring out what that meant, which for me was remembering a computer graphics course that I enjoyed in undergrad and then trying to figure out how I could do more of that. I did not have enough of the fundamentals at that point, so I went to grad school. So now that I'm in grad school for the second time, I feel like I'm really a professional grad school person. There are basically two reasons that I know I have to go to grad. Like it is absolutely not required, especially in a domain like CS. Nobody needs to get a graduate degree unless one of two things. One is you need to actually learn more, and that was my case. Like I needed to go learn some of the fundamentals and play around with computer graphics and just, CS and algorithms and all that stuff more so that I could convince people that I could do a job. And then the other is it's kind of a checkbox to help you convince people. Like if you've been doing a thing for a long time, then they don't care what graduate degrees or what degrees you have in general. Like some recruiter may, but the people who actually know, like, no, if you've been doing this, then clearly you can. But if you're just starting out, like me with no software experience, you kind of need to convince people of that, and you need the knowledge. So anyway, grad school for 2 years to get into computer graphics, and then basically I spent my entire career after that doing computer graphics at startups, at Sun Microsystems as a contractor. Sun Microsystems is now Oracle. They kind of went in the early 2000s. They hit the iceberg and they just went down and down and down for several years. Annual layoffs, super fun. And then eventually they got acquired near the bottom of the ocean by Oracle.
I wouldn't know what annual layoffs feel like.
Yeah, unfortunately, like seeing the entire industry, especially super successful companies with a lot of money in the bank, get into a death spiral.
Don't forget the record profits.
Yeah. Like I know people have to, like companies need to save money and be financially, wise and all that stuff, but it decimates morale. It just totally decimates, because everybody on the inside is like, well, when am I going to get hit? Which means, maybe they're not going anywhere right now because honestly, the tech economy is a hard place to move around in for the last couple of years. But as soon as they can, why wouldn't they? Right? Well, it cuts one of those emotional and loyalty ties that you have to your place of business because you realize company is going to cut me whenever they want, it's a good thing to know because it is true at any time in any situation. But it's kind of hard to do that to the entire workforce. Okay. But anyway, side comments aside, so I moved to California when I needed a job after a startup blew up after grad school. And then spent my entire career in Silicon Valley, moving around, trying new things. Every time I would switch jobs between every 2 to 4 years, essentially, try new things, something fun would come up. The priority for me, like a lot of people think, okay, well, where do I want to be? Where is my career going? What title do I want? And that That was never mine. I did not care about titles. I cared about what I was going to be doing every day. What are the things that I'm working on? Are they interesting? What is the technology, usually computer graphics? Who are the people that I'm going to be working with? And I've left some places because the people and the teams ended up not being very fun. So I needed to go do something else. And then I'm good. Like we all spend most of our waking lives working. So the priority for me was making sure that those waking hours were fun. Otherwise, why am I doing this? So moved around a bunch. I was at Sun after the iceberg for more years. I was probably there for almost 8 years total before I jumped off. And then I went to Adobe for 2.5 years, which is a great place. Worked on Flex, which was kind of a programming layer on top of the Flash engine. And then from there, I joined Google. Specifically, so when I interviewed at Adobe, I also interviewed at Google. Romain had gone there. I knew him because he was an intern at Sun that I worked with, and we started the book that we wrote together while he was there. And so he pulled me in to interview for a position on Android. I'm not sure if it was I don't think it was public at that point. Anyway, that didn't work out. Turns out a lot of interviews at Google don't. And so I went off to Adobe, and then 2.5 years later, he said, we still need that animation thing that I talked to you about before. So why don't you come talk to us? I'm like, I know what's going to happen, but sure. I'll go play around with algorithms for an afternoon, and then I'll get rejected, and I'll go back to Adobe, and that's fine. And then for whatever reason, they made a poor decision, and I got through that time. And then I was on the Android team ever since. So that was almost 14 years.
Or maybe we can guess that 2 years in Adobe, you learn how to balance a black-red tree. Nope. I mean, how about that?
No, in fact, that was one of my interview questions. The second time around was balancing black-red. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I really should have studied for the interviews this time. I really should have. Because it turns out, so like I said, I went to grad school so that I could learn the fundamentals. But really, the fundamentals are taught at a better level in undergrad. And by the time you get to the master's program, they kind of assume that you have all that stuff learned. And so I'm going to tell you a secret, just because it's between us three and nobody is listening right now. Mm-hmm. I have never taken an algorithms course, and I've never taken a data structures course. And I think what you really learn in school, and more importantly in your career, is how to learn things. Like, you ask me to do a job, I'm going to go learn what I need to and do that thing. But if you ask me in an interview to use a particular approach to solve a particular kind of problem, like if I haven't done it on the job, I'm not going to know the answer. So then it's a matter of like, okay, how lucky you are with the questions and how much you can figure out with, asking the interviewer on the fly, and how many of those you completely tank on that day.
Yeah, I mean, it's the attitude. I guess it's a lot of things when you get that kind of interviews. So yeah, so I mean that's good for me, because I also can't do that kind of stuff. I mean, we can talk and try to brainstorm things, but if you ask me, can you improve the performance of this 5 lines? I was like, sure, ciao. It's yeah, sure. Pass.
Yeah.
I take another one. Let's take the next one.
Yep.
And then, so you get in, and now you work with Romain, right?
Right. So I joined his team. He was on the Toolkit team at that time. I think we had just brought in a team of people to take over the launcher. The launcher was basically like 1/3 of what Romain was doing. And then that was taken over by, I think, 3 or 4 people. And then
classic Romain.
Yeah. And it was classic Android too. Like, everybody on that team just had like multiple jobs doing way too much and way too many things. And then the point at which I joined was the point where they kind of started staffing up the team. I think when I joined, there was probably 300 people, which sounds like a lot, but if you think, okay, that was core platform, but it was also all of the apps and all of the business folks and like everything, right? Because the apps hadn't been sort of split out to the apps teams in Google overall. Like, Gmail was part of that, calendar, contacts, all that stuff was happening in the Android team. And there was only 300 of us total doing it. And then we were staffing up at that time to eventually have more. Anyway, so there was probably 5 or 6 people on the toolkit team total at that point. And I stayed on the toolkit team almost my entire time at Android. So I wrote the original animator stuff and some of the property stuff, and then worked with Romain on performance and some of the graphics acceleration stuff for the messy Honeycomb release. And then after that, just more performance, more graphics, more animation, eventually leading that team. And then eventually it was like, oh, why don't I try some new things? Which is one of the advantages to big companies, is there are other things that you can try without actually completely bailing and pushing reset. So I went to try DevRel, which is kind of my hobby job there anyway. And that was fun. It was less fun during pandemic, because it turns out one of the really fun things is going to community events. And when those aren't happening and you're doing videos in your office instead, super not interesting. I like doing videos, but not as a replacement for actually traveling and talking to people instead of my camera. So eventually that was enough, and I came back to engineering, went into graphics, and eventually ended up in the toolkit team, back to where I started, which is where I ended up my time there.
I have a question about the size of the team, because you started with super small teams, right? You said 5-6 people,
yeah.
And I guess that at some point in the people, the number of people increased over time,
yeah.
right? So, but I keep reading, people like, the perfect size of a team is about 5-6 people.
Yeah.
Then it gets the communication overhead gets weird, and you have to split teams, and then it's even worse because now. So did you see something like that? You started when the team was small, and you ended up like 10 years later with a definitely larger team, or how was the experience?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think all companies go through this, and I honestly don't know the right answer for it. Like the early team was so very small that everybody was overworked, and the quality was not what you would want, because we were racing to get things done, right? So I remember somebody asking, like, Romain and I gave a conference talk somewhere, probably 2012-ish. And it was this very serious engineer, as many engineers are, saying, "Oh, so you joked about this this process thing, but really, what was your process for shipping software?" And we said, "Well, we write the code, and then we ship it." And he's like, "Hey, yeah, that's very funny." No, but what was the process? The process was we wrote the code and we shipped it. Like that literally was what we did on Android, because the team was small enough that everybody had personal responsibility for making sure their stuff worked. We all tested on our phones. There was a build system, obviously, like there was light little bits of process, but there wasn't process like, how do we communicate the features between each other, and how do we do the test? Like that did not need to exist, and does not need to exist in a team that's small enough. But it also meant that, things were a bit fragile off and on. And then eventually you need more people to handle that, fragility. You need to make things more robust. You need to do more features to, keep up in the market. And every person that you add increases the overhead of communication. And then fast forward several years, and you spend a lot of your time in meetings and writing documents and filling out one-pagers and requesting that from release team, because I want to work on this thing. Instead of just like, when I joined, it was more everybody was pretty well trusted to do what they needed to, like making decisions on features that they'd implement. There was a little bit of sanity checking, but basically, this is the expert, and if they say that this is what we need, this is what we need, and you go and you write it as fast as you can, you get onto the next feature, as opposed to like, this is what I think should happen, and then some process and team somewhere else makes a decision of whether you're allowed to do that. So yeah, I saw Android grow from 300 to many, many thousands. Including all the teams that were then spread throughout Google on app teams. And I saw like the toolkit team a couple years after, let's see, I'm trying to remember, maybe 2014-ish, Romain went off to work on robot technology for a while. The team at that point was like 8 or 9 people. And so I took it over there, and it grew to maybe 35-ish while I was leading it.
Okay.
Now, one of the approach is like, you can't just like add a bunch of people and then you're all, you know, in a room, 35 people shouting each other down. Then you have sub teams, right? So we had, and I, you know, grew that management layer so that there was somebody managing a team that did Android X infrastructure. There was somebody else managing or leading teams that, you know, did architecture-y stuff or visual components or whatever. It's like, then you start separating it so that for the most part, there's a smaller team that can get its job done. There's still the overhead of communicating with each other because you're still shipping a single thing, but that's how you keep a lid on the madness, is by trying to divide things in logical chunks along the way as you're adding people.
Okay. So that makes sense. So the team stays small, but then you add more teams basically to parallelize things, right? So you from a feature or from a domain point of view, you create teams that can work in isolation, but also coordination. Because if you are shipping one thing together, I mean,
you still need to, still need to coordinate. Yep. And that's where all the overhead comes from. And in the limit, it stops companies from doing anything, right? Like you get to a certain company size, like you look at the amount that you can accomplish with a massive, massive team, and you remember what you used to be able to accomplish with, you know, a piece of string and a button and 1.5 people, and like you cannot compare. But you also can't compare, you know, the level of quality and testing that you're getting in the new product. Like it is a reality that that's what you need to do in the long run, but it's a little sad how less productive it feels, at least.
On the other side, there is a lot of managers that they need to eat and pay mortgages. So you need to add these layers of project managers, right? I mean, it's also, nobody thinks about the manager, right? Yeah. So, but jokes aside, I see the struggle because I work with startups. I also work with larger companies, and you have, you know, when you have a startup mindset, is more like a small team that you mentioned, right? Everybody's kind of committed to everything. We feel this thing is ours, so we want to ship it. It's a bit, sometimes it's a bit half-ass, and sometimes it's a bit like fragile, but then you ship it, you know, people like it, and you get the feedback. So it's a very fast, but also, you know, very tricky to balance because you never stop, right? You get overworked very quickly like this because you want to ship stuff and do things, and eventually probably you realize that a bit more process slows you down, but also protects you in a way.
I think that's a great point. That's one of the things that came up over and over again in talking to people for the research on the book, was that feeling of personal investment and mission that people felt in the small early team that was still there when I joined because it was small enough for that. But at some point, all of these big companies, I believe, lose that, right? You can have it in a smaller team, like you can feel that personal connection to the people around you. But if the overall size of the team working on the thing that you're shipping is like in the hundreds or thousands of people, like at some point it's hard to be as passionate about that thing and to throw your life into it for this thing that feels like a corporate artifact, as opposed to, you know, I'm painting an extreme here. Like I was still into, you know, Android and the company and stuff, but the level of commitment and the level of personal investment that people would make in that situation is far different from they would for a small team where everybody just wants to ship the thing.
It's also very different when, you know, the stakeholders are next to you, or you know, your manager is the stakeholder, as opposed to someone that is, you know, 3 or 4 layers above you, and then you've never seen in your life. You vaguely know what their face is because they have an avatar on the emails that show up, but that's all you know about them. So all of that does contribute, I find, to, you know, the willingness and also the ability to empathize and in turn to invest a part of yourself into what you're doing.
Yep.
I also feel like, you know, at some point that you have this, how it's called, bystander effect. You know, when you see something or somebody in danger and it's like 3 people, you feel like you need to actually jump in and help, right? And if it's like 20 people around, you feel you feel more like, oh, somebody else is gonna help them. So it is a psychological thing that it's real, and I think that with software, it's probably something that can happen, because if it's just 3 of us, I mean, we need to do this, right? I'm doing it because, you know, Frank is doing another thing and Mario is doing another thing. If it's like 50 people, it's like, you know what, I don't feel it today, somebody else is gonna pick it up. And, you know, if it's me today and tomorrow is you and the day after is, we are 50, right? If everyone does the same thing for one day, it's just like 2 months of people kind of, you know, and then you get detached. It's I think it's a weird thing, but it's a reality, especially because, I mean, you go through it over time. So you join, you have like a honeymoon phase, and you want to do things, and then it's kind of naturally, you know, you have swings at this is cool, I'm super motivated, and then now I'm not motivated, and you know, I think it's a natural thing. It's sad because, you know, eventually from the outside it's like, oh, these people are not working fast as they were working before.
Yeah.
But also, you know, cut me some slack. Give me a break, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just sort of natural evolution of organizations in general. And like I said, I don't know what the answer is. Like I love that you can have startups with that feeling, or that, you know, the folks on early Android worked that hard to sort of do that thing. Because if they hadn't, I don't think Android would be around. Like somebody else would have taken that spot. But companies grow up and they size up, and how do you? I don't think it's possible to retain that feeling of mission. Like, to some extent you can with smaller teams, and if you could really separate things out with very clean boundaries, like maybe you could retain that team feeling. But I just feel like the more dissociated everybody gets from the big thing that they're shipping, the more it's like, you know, yeah, they want their life, which is fair. Like I don't think we work to work, right?
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's. I mean, think about how you end up in a company and you are like, I don't know, 25, 30, whatever, right? So you get the ball rolling, you know, you're 35, you meet something, you get married, you get kids. Your life changes, and the work attitude has to change at some point. I mean, if you ask me, I mean, 10 years ago, I was like, yeah, office life, this is so cool, let's have fun with colleagues. If you ask me today, I was like, sure. Oh, do you want to go back to the office? Sure. I need $2 million a year. Give me two. That's the only way. That's the only requirement. No, but jokes aside, you know, your life changed. So at some point, your attitude toward works also has to change a bit.
I guess when the attractiveness of going for drinks with your colleagues starts declining, that's the moment when you're like, yeah, but I can also not. Like, it's fine being on the sofa tonight.
No,
I can deal with that.
it's. I think things change, right? Life happens, and you know, it's okay that also how you relate to work changes. And the idea of retaining that startup mindset or thing, it reminds me it was Microsoft that had that thing that, you know, you had different teams working on the same stuff at the same time so they can compete against each other. Like, that's a very, 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 very toxic environment, but you know, maybe it works. I mean, you are competing with other people in another room that are, I mean, yes, maybe if you have like, you know, youngsters and they are full of energy, they do hackathons and they drink Red Bull and that kind of stuff. I mean, if you ask me, I mean, in my 40s, sure. Yes. You know what? Yeah, sure. No. I'm doing you know what? I'm doing the documentation of the stuff. That's I'm gonna write the analytics. I'm do some reporting because that's because you change also what you want to do, right? The idea of being super competitive or want to ship. I mean, right now I have a feeling that I like to ship my personal projects and that work the stuff that I work on. It's nice to ship it, but it's way less emotional than in the past, right?
Yep.
So you have a sense of accomplishment because this is so cool, right? So we worked nice and people are happy. The review was okay, and now we ship it, and the devs are happy. It's more like this is good, right? But it's not how it was 10 years ago. That if you fail, oh my God, I'm a failure, right? So there is also that kind of personal growth that happens over time, I think.
Yeah. And it depends on the product too. Like I mean, I can say from personal experience, it was a lot more motivating to work on something like the Android platform where you could see, you know, somebody having a bug next to you on, you know, a stranger on the train, using your software. Like it feels horrible, but it's kind of cool to see these things in the real world, and that motivates you to do the work and get it out there and get it right, more than like I ship some software that somebody in an enterprise in a different country is going to use, and like none of my friends or family knows that thing. But yeah, things change over time. We grow, we get old and boring.
I mean, this is actually interesting because that's something that happened to me because at the beginning I was working on access gateways. Basically, I was building routers, right? So, like for DSL connection. So you have this tiny.
You worked on the crappy ones that the ISP gives you, or
no? I actually
that's a leading question.
No. There was.
I don't remember. So
there was a
in
high.
My defense.
There was a high-end access gateway for the ISP, but those are tricky because, you know, if you look at the numbers, that thing is very expensive, but they lend it to you for free because of, you know, the whole reasons of getting customers. So it was a nice piece of metal with a nice piece of software on it because it was Linux all over the thing. So it was very fun to work on. But then you realize this thing is going to be in like 1 million houses in Italy. Nobody will ever know. And I was like, oh, I worked on your thing. And I was like, yeah, I just plug it in and it connects to the internet. So what? And I was like, sure, if only, right? If only was so easy. And at some point I was like, you know what, you know, Android was coming out and I was like, let's try to build something for the people next to me on the train. So, you know what, that's my app, right? So I went through that phase where I want to be a bit recognized. You know, I don't want to be famous, but I want to work on software that people can use, even if it's just like a tiny app. And the whole thing started from there. You know, eventually you just build on that, and then you say, okay, let's talk. Let's write some books. Let's go to conferences, and then you make it a lot about the people and less about the software. You know, that would happen to me. At some point I was like, I have a lot of friends that I know because I went around at conferences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, you know, we haven't worked together on anything, but we can talk about software, but we also can talk about everything else. So it's a nice evolution when you have a clear idea of, I would like to do this because of, right? So you find your why you want to do this.
Yeah, everyone needs a motivation. If it's just the paycheck, I feel like that it's not quite. Yeah, paycheck is important clearly, but you need a life. You need more of an inner reason to work on things, whether it's the technology itself or the people. Like that was one of my triggers for wondering if it was time to do something different. Was the people factor got a lot less interesting starting with pandemic, but it didn't come back all the way. Right, because people aren't back in the office much. Some people moved away. Like everybody sort of, started prioritizing personal life on the outside, whether that meant, working full time at home or just not coming in that much or moving or whatever. And like, I understand it. On the other hand, it did take a lot of the people joy away. And I agree. Like I found the same thing from conferences. Like that was great joys in doing the tech work, was being able to go to these conferences and meet a ever expanding community of other people. Like I did not work directly with them, but it was great to get to know them and see them on an ongoing basis and build a people connection. Because it turns out that I wasn't writing my code just because I loved the code itself, but I loved it for some of the people aspects that I got as a side effect of working on it.
And I think maybe our industry is sort of unique in the sense that there is probably a higher percentage of people that do what we do because they fundamentally like what's involved in it.
I think we're very lucky in that.
Yeah. Like if I mean, it's just, I'm just going to make a random example, but I cannot imagine that someone that works, as a post office clerk does it because they are passionate about filling forms at the post office. They do it because it's a good job and it pays the bills and it probably has some other characteristics that make it desirable. But I know a lot of people in our industry that started coding because they liked the idea of coding. And I don't see like a post office clerk starting to fill forms just for the fun of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice side effect that we are generally able to make a decent living at this thing.
Yeah.
But I agree, like especially the people that I think are, best at their jobs are that way because they really love what they do. And so they love solving these problems and diving in really deep and sort of figuring out, okay, what's the best way to solve a particular problem? And you're not going to get that if somebody's just checked out. Like I would still recommend CS as a general thing for, a career, but I would really recommend it for people whose mind likes the kind of problems that we solve, because then it is fun and then it doesn't feel as much like work.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I can say about most of my personal experiences, that a lot of the things that I do, they don't necessarily feel like work. As in, they don't feel like something I do because I need an income, even though, as you said, you can also make a good income with our line of work. But I do what I do because it's what I like doing.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky enough that it's also a job, because I know that there are other hobbies that people struggle to turn into an income stream. But I think that
such as screenwriting.
I wasn't going to mention Chet. But I think that makes a huge difference in terms of the general, I don't know how to define it. It's just like the quality of the people side of things. Because when you work in an environment where everyone is, or most people are very passionate about what they do, they care. Even you can even see that in environments where you would think, this is a poorly managed environment and people shouldn't care. You still find people that care, even if they really wouldn't have a reason. Maybe the company doesn't treat them well, maybe whatever. But they still like what they do and they still want to do the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic that like in all the places I've worked, if you have a problem and you just need to work through it or get some more ideas on it, you go to the person next to you and you explain what's going on, and they're super interested and they want to help you because it's an interesting problem. And having that passion, I think is key. So it's not just like, I like working with nice people. No. I like working with people who care, who actually give a crap about what they're working on. And that passion, I think, makes all of it more interesting. Yeah, absolutely.
I like to work with smart people.
Yep.
Smarter than me. This is something that we were discussing, a couple of weeks ago.
Important.
Smarter than me. Man, you have no idea how happy I am when I'm like, I don't understand shit about this thing. and I can learn from this person here. And it's a nice environment, so and now I'm old enough I can go there and say, you know what, I have no idea how to do this. Do we want to pair this, right? And then you have somebody that says, oh yeah, I saw this and I know how to do it, or even I have no idea, so it's the two of us now. Let's figure it out. So that's the best, and you're very lucky, and you need to be very grateful when you end up in some place like that, because as a contractor, I worked in a lot of places. You don't always get that. You get a lot of workplace, and then it's also one of the reasons because they need a contractor, because maybe they have such a bad environment that cannot hire, right? So at some point you have a couple of people that they made themselves unreplaceable, quote unquote, because you can't replace them with anybody. That's because they are necessary. But they created such a bad environment where you need a mercenary that jumps in and says, okay, I get the money for 6 months. For 6 months, I can work wherever, and then I'm out of here. So it's a very different environment. So I'm very grateful when I end up in a place where, those 6 months, you approach the end of the contract like, I really wish they can extend the contract because I like it here, right? So I like it here from a day-by-day point of view, from a people point of view, because the work at some point it can be work, right? So we do 100 apps. It's basically pretty much 90% is a JSON coming from a backend, and you show it in a list, right? This is what I always say. That's what I did for like 10 years everywhere. I mean,
you made my career just sound so much less interesting than it used to be.
Not your career. But from a app development point of view, jokes aside, that it's a very routine kind of work. So I'm very, very grateful when I end up in a place where I can learn from people because they are passionate, not necessarily motivated. Because I'm also very aware of, you can't be motivated every day because that's a sign of you're a psychopath, right? So if you're every day you are like, yeah, that's something
wrong.
Yes, you need to check that. I mean, probably there's drug abuse or something, because nobody can do that. But for jokes aside, you need to be very, very, very grateful. And I really actually I'm super jealous about your situation at Google, because you were there for such a long time. That's such a good, like a green flag. How is it? It's a good sign that the environment was healthy enough, right? Because what's the usual chart? Is it like 1 year and a half, couple of years, right? I mean, in the industry, for me, that was the idea. I never been in a permanent position for more than 1 year and something, and so when I see people like you or Romain or Thor the other week, I was like, oh, you have been here like 10 years. It was like, man, that's lucky.
Yeah, it's nice when it works out. Definitely. Especially after spending most of my career hopping every 2 to 4 and then being in a place where I didn't feel like I need to. You brought up there's another interesting thing that you brought up, the ability for us to be in environments where we can be very honest about what we know and we don't, I think is super healthy, right? Like, and to some extent it's an age and maturity and confidence thing, because I think it's hard if you're really new to your job or career to admit that you don't know things, because you're kind of afraid, somebody's going to look at you and go, oh, why do I hire you then? And then at some point you just figure, I don't know these things, but I know other things. And like the people in the room, the people that I'm talking to understand that I know other things, and nobody knows everything. So like I use this a lot on stage, or like when talking to people about how to give these talks, like, well, how do you answer questions when you don't know the answer? And like, well, you admit that, you're honest. Because the people in the audience understand that you are an expert in some areas, and you can't be an expert in everything. so you just honest and say, that's not my field. I don't know what's going on there. Does anybody else know the answer here? But I think that's really healthy, and I think it's accepted a lot in the better environments in which I worked, where everybody in the room is smart at different things and they understand that you don't know. And so it's much better that you can admit it and move on and help solve the problem rather than pretending that you know and not getting anywhere.
I mean, you can, how it, fake it until you make it, right?
Yeah.
Maybe in some area, especially interviews, but where the same thing happened to us, me and Sebastiano a couple of years ago. We were like, oh, this Jetpack Compose is coming out. You are working on Android Studio. I'm working on documentation. We are not really doing Compose for work.
Yeah.
How do we want to do it? Oh, let's learn it together live on Twitch. Let's show everybody that we have no idea how to work with this thing and just wing it.
Yeah.
So I can actually be here 2 years later. We met hundreds of people after hundreds of episodes, and it's pretty clear the mindset, the attitude. I can do a lot of things. I cannot do way more things.
Yeah.
But I can learn.
Yep.
I will never judge you for not knowing something, but I will judge you for not wanting to learn something. That's it. That for me, that's a deal breaker, right? Like, oh yeah, I don't know to do this. Okay, that's not a problem. So this is Google search. Ta-da! Let's do it, right? But if you're no, I'm not gonna do it because I don't want to do it, or this is too hard, or things like that. No, we're not friends anymore. We need to. But so yeah, I really appreciate that we are on the same page.
Yeah.
Sebastian, do we have question from the chat?
We have 4 questions. Yes, I was just waiting for a good moment to bring them up.
How about I shut up for that?
That's not what I said. That's what I meant. So the first question is from Zach. So he said, Chet and I once walked through a military parade, and despite just being the 2 of us, he did not attempt to stop me from walking in front of a tank. So I asked what the minimum number of people is for Chet to not have the bystander effect.
Wow, there's a lot of subtext there. So first of all, I think I remember the military parade he's talking about, because the only one I can remember going by was I was at a conference in Lviv. It would have been a DroidCon Ukraine, DevFest Ukraine, pre-COVID. And that Sunday, the organizers were very nicely taking us on a tour of this lovely town, and a military parade came down the middle of the street, which at the time, like, there was a bit of a massing on the eastern border of Ukraine. And so it was a little disturbing to sort of see this thing. And, you're kind of, what seemed like a joke at the time, like, are these Ukrainian tanks? And then, how many years later, it got a lot more real. Anyway, that must be what he's talking about. I don't remember in particular. I have to assume that I didn't do anything about it because maybe it would have been amusing. How many people? It feels like once you get above, I don't know, 10 people or so, like it sort of depends on the overall size of the project and stuff. I feel like, and there's different levels of, like, management versus being technical. Like, a manager with 3 or 4 reports can still be highly technical. Once you get like 6 to 8 to 10 reports, you're pretty much just managing. And once you get above that level, then there's communication between those people, and you start having, documents and priority lists and stuff. Actual bystander effect, I don't know. Like, we did have teams of that size in Android, and I feel like we were all still working pretty hard and passionate about it. But yeah, once it gets up to, several hundred people and several levels between you and the executives, and then you feel like the executives aren't aligned with you. This is not, let's be clear, this is not my experience at Google. At Sun, I did feel like the people running the company were business people who were into the power and the money. And that was not very motivating down at the engineering level. And then you start checking in because of the the Paycheck, and then you start looking for other jobs because that's not why we're at these things necessarily. So I'm sorry about the tank, Zach, but
we'll do
there
it
must
again.
have been some good reason.
Yeah, just to add to that, I have felt that bystander effect sometimes, even in a relatively small team. I think there's a lot to it that is about the environment in which you're in.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The execs is one such example, but in one of my previous jobs, I used to work in an agency, and sometimes the clients really seem to be trying to make you not care about their product by showing that they were the first ones not to give a crap. So
nice.
That in that case is more like, well, they don't care, so why should I?
Yeah. I was reminded too, when Ivana was talking earlier, like one of the reasons that I left, that I did not like my first job out of college, was that effect. Like, it was a relatively small team of people that I worked with. I knew everybody pretty well, but I remember having a conversation with someone one time where, like, I tracked down whatever networking issue was going on. Like I was basically like root causing a bug, except it was for hardware and communication stuff. And they said, so, what's going on? And I said, well, it turns out that the problem, and they stopped me and said, what's the answer? I'm like, I have to get out of here. Like, if you do not care about what the initial problem, what the root cause was, then I have no interest in working with you, because you don't care about your job.
Yeah.
But, and that's, to your point, like, it was a small team, but it was the people on the team that were bystanders.
That kills the morale instantly.
Yeah.
I mean, they were
it did for me. They were there for the paycheck. I was there because I wanted to give a crap, and apparently I didn't belong.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can do that once, and I'm over. If I come to you like, and then you shut me down, I was like, okay, I got the message, and then you start reaching out to recruiters.
Yeah.
So I have a doctor appointment, right? And I'm interviewing the shit out of this. So.
Best part, when I left that job, my skip level manager, another reason that maybe I wasn't totally into it, said, well, good luck in grad school, and I just want to let you know we've enjoyed working with you here, and if it doesn't work out, we'd be happy to give you an interview for working on the team again. I'm like, oh, so it wasn't like, if it doesn't work out, you're welcome back. It's like, if it doesn't work out, you're welcome back to interview. I'm like, another nail in the coffin. Goodbye.
Yes.
They enjoyed it so much that they would want you re-interviewing again.
Yes. Wow, I mean, maybe his sense of humor was just a lot more subtle than I gave him credit for, because it was a really nice dig, whether he intended it or not.
Oh man.
That was savage.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you are welcome to come back whenever you want to interview again. Well, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, that's anyway. Sebastian, let's pick another question.
Yes.
What do we got there?
The next question is, what work are you most proud of? And I would add, why?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not a single thing. Like, there are different things I'm proud of for different reasons. Like, some of the stuff I did on Android, I'm proud because it did have that reach of, whatever, 3.5 billion people using the code that you wrote. Like, that was kind of epic in terms of impact on a product and the people who use it. But there are things that I did on other projects that didn't have that reach, that I'm also very proud of. I think because, like, for me, it's about taking initial problem description and coming up with a thing. Like, you work with other people, but like the animation stuff that I did at Sun, like creating a library basically from scratch, some help with colleagues around, but like I had this initial idea and then implemented this thing, and then doing something, you know, similar at Adobe and something similar at Android, but like being the person that sort of took this problem, okay, well, we can't do this thing. What is the solution to that? And actually working through the technical problems and then producing an API that people would then use to produce these apps. Like that whole, you know, ground to, I like to say soup to nuts, and my colleagues in London would say, I don't know what you're saying. What is soup to nuts? Like that, you know, start to finish of a project was really satisfying to me in all of those places, even though, you know, the number of developers and app users for the stuff I did at Sun was, you know, small compared to Android, and on Flex, way smaller, right? Because it was a sort of bad time in the history of Flex to be doing that. But it was still satisfying to work on that thing, and I was proud of the results.
Mm-hmm. So maybe, Ivan, what is the work you are most proud of?
That router that nobody appreciated.
No, I don't know. You know what? It's gonna be okay. So hear me out. Documentation.
Oh, nice choice.
So now,
all right.
Yeah, okay. Not because you are paying my mortgage, but because I really enjoy in this phase of my life. Because at some point I looked back at how I contribute to open source. Okay, I have been using open source libraries for forever, right? But then I started looking at when I start using a library or something, how do I contribute? Because, you know, you have every year, you have November or something, you know, you have to do the contribution and get it. And then I start thinking, okay, I don't do libraries. I don't release a lot of open source software, but I contribute to open source library with the documentation. So I start using something, I go through the README, and then, you know, you copy paste the command, and it doesn't work on your environment, and you try to figure out how to do it on your environment, and then you're like, well, I could add this to the README, right? And now you are basically creating a new troubleshooting section in a README of a random library, and it kept happening over time. You know, like I like using libraries, and as a developer, I know that nobody can cover every edge case, and I'm pretty much the edge case in a lot of the situation. And I'm like, okay, I'm giving back. I don't give you back code, or, you know, I'm not fixing bugs. Most of the time, I don't have either the capacity or the ability to fix a bug. I can report a bug, like Sebastiano. He is like a master of bug issues, but most of the time I ended up improving the documentation. And that's also something that led me to the decision to actually get my current contract, right? And I was thinking about that the other day. It has been one of my longest contracts, not from a contract point of view, like places where I worked. And I was like, and I'm doing tutorials, I'm doing, you know, code labs and documentation. So that's how I give back. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes me proud, because I was a developer, and, you know, when I was a developer, it sounds dramatic. So I'm a developer. I have been a developer for a long time.
I was a developer, but you still are.
Okay. Fair enough.
Even you're technically a technical writer, so that makes me the only developer here.
No, I'm not a technical writer. I'm not a technical writer because I can't English, so I can't English most of the time. But the idea is that, you know, if you're a junior or you're starting, you rely a lot on the documentation. Yeah. And when the documentation lets you down because of an edge case, right? They didn't mean to not cover that thing. It's maybe it's just your setup that's super weird, and, you know, it's an edge case. So I like the idea that I'm filling that gap for the next unlucky fella that, you know, is gonna just try out the library and say, oh yeah, this poor soul had my same problem. You know, the whole Stack Overflow attitude, right? So you go to Stack Overflow and help people, right, with basic stuff. So, I mean, now ChatGPT is going to do it, but okay, but you get the point. So documentation. Actually, the thing that I like most is documentation, improving the documentation. It's the developer experience somehow, right? So the idea that I'm making it a bit easier for the next person that wants to try this thing. So they don't have to go through my same pain, whatever, like, you know, like a parent. I mean, this is very philosophical now, but that's the idea, right? So you messed up, you want your kids to kind of mess up a bit less, right? So I don't want a snowflake, but I really don't want a savage that, you know, grew up with the wolves, because that was the idea. So it kind of, you know, that the middle ground.
It sounds very selfless. There's a selfish aspect in that area that I agree with, though, which is I find it very satisfying. It's kind of like root causing bugs. I find it very satisfying to be able to deeply understand how something works and then articulate it to an audience, whether it's through article, video, conference talk, whatever. Like digesting the very technical information and then being able to explain it to people and help them understand, I find also very satisfying.
I love it. I mean, I remember one of my past talks, and somebody at a meetup in Berlin, they at the end of the talk, they approached me and they were like, you were able to talk about monads for 45 minutes without ever saying monads. And I told them, yeah, because if I say monad, people just freak out. They just turn off their brain. Oh my God, functional programming. You see, that's it. If I tell
the
you,
moment you say monad, you lost me.
Yeah, that's it. But if I tell you, oh, there is a flat map. Ah, okay. It's the thing has a map. Okay, also fold. Ah, okay. And that's the idea, right? So how do you digest, as you say, you process the information, you make it a bit more digestible, not make it simple per se, but a bit less intimidating, maybe. So
the comedy writer in me wants you to go back to that conversation and responds, "What's a monad?"
Yeah, monad it's a functor or whatever category, blah blah blah. I really don't.
Okay, I'm leaving this stream. You said too many.
No, but that's. I mean, jokes aside, that's also some problem that the functional programming community has, right? So they struggle to make things accessible for the everyday
the
Joe.
masses?
How do we put it? No, but it's. I mean,
I have a friend who was and probably still is deeply into Scala, like as a religious person would be. I don't know what a religious person is doing with Scala.
Are
but
religious people doing Scala now, or
too much, like way too much off that deep end, where every conversation would eventually end up in his justifying Scala to you for whatever you were trying to do, like, order dinner. And eventually the phrase would come up, no, you don't understand. Everything is an object. And I kept saying, no, I do understand. I just don't care.
Yeah. Yes. Everything is a function. I understand from a mathematical point of view. Yes, just don't.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Yeah. I just want to log this thing on a console. I don't care about if it's pure or not. Okay. Yeah. I just want to log deep, but you can't. So that's the idea. I mean, for me, it's very important to, make it a bit easier for the next person. So I really enjoy that.
Let's move on to the next question. How did you handle work-life balance throughout your career?
Good question. I didn't really have a plan to some extent. I think what Ivan was saying earlier is part of it. Like, you get older and life intervenes and it will make you do that. Like, if you have a partner, if you have a family, like, if you want to keep those things, then you
Yes.
will figure out how to carve out some time So that, you know, eventually my weekends were mostly mine. On the other hand, like I don't mind crunch times. Like we certainly had them on Android, more so when I first joined, where, you know, you just needed to be there, you know, late at night or overnight in some cases, or coming in on a Sunday or whatever, as long as those are limited. Like if it's unlimited, that's a death march and you need to go somewhere else instead. But I don't mind like plowing in a bunch of extra effort if at the end of that, then you can go back to your work-life balance life. But I do think that life will force it on you eventually. If you are, you know, single and you don't have other things to do, it's maybe a little bit hard, and maybe you need to make that effort. On the other hand, like as you were saying, Seb, the fact that we all enjoy this means if you enjoy being in the office, if you like working that much, like, well, is that really so horrible? I think it's only horrible if you have these other things in life that you wanted to accomplish and somehow you never get the time to do them. You know, then you need to sort of evaluate your priorities and see if you can carve out some time somehow.
Yeah, I guess it's a good criteria when you realize that your work is happening by like taking things away from you, then that is the point where you should probably stop and reevaluate your work-life balance. Obviously, if you already work 4 hours a day, then maybe there's a problem somewhere, but maybe what you want to do is a different job. But so just to give an example from last week. So in the past few years, I love what I do. Like I love coding, I love all this stuff, but I don't really code on my spare time anymore because I have other things that I want to do. And if I were to code when I'm not working as well, then I would feel like I'm always working.
Yep.
And also that would again it would come to me by taking oxygen out from other interests that I have. And last week I found myself on Saturday being like, oh, I've actually like watched a YouTube tutorial from a guy that implemented a falling sun simulator in JavaScript. And I'm like, I wonder how hard it is to do in Kotlin. And I was not planning to do any coding at all whatsoever. And then I just had this itch in the back of my mind. I was like, okay, fine. I'm just going to be coding, you know, a few hours, which is something, again, I never do on a weekend unless I am like on a deadline that I know I'm going to miss for work. And I think because it's not something that I normally do, then it felt good.
Yeah.
I don't mind. Again, I can also work sometimes when I'm not supposed to, like if I am running up against a deadline. Again, I can work a weekend or I can work a public holiday, knowing though that I will get that time back later. I refuse to do crunch if I know that I'm never going to be able to recover that time. I'm very lucky that I can, but to me, I think it's important that I still, at the end of the day, even if it's not mathematically the same, I still need to get to the point where I feel like I have time to do the things that I want, even when the things that I want to do are work related. So yeah, that was a bit of a ramble, but
yeah, being able to choose part of what you do instead of it all being directed for you.
Yeah.
But you know, I really can relate about with the crunch time example, because in the past, Sebastiano remembers, I worked for sport events company. Okay, so if you think you have a deadline, think again, because if you're working for Champions League or FIFA or Olympics, that's actually a deadline, right? Yeah. There is no, oh yeah, we are one week late. That doesn't work. Well, I mean, you have Google I/O, so that's actually that's a deadline.
Yeah, and hardware deadlines are very serious too. Like if the factory is spinning up, you cannot miss, right?
That's the idea, right? So I can work with that. So we were aware that, okay, you know, Olympics are starting. time can't move like this.
Yeah.
It has to move like this,
Yep.
right? But you know that when when you ship the thing, when the event is done, nobody's gonna give you shit for 2 weeks, right? So nobody's gonna come to
Hopefully.
you. Oh yeah, no. But that was the agreement, right?
Yeah.
Like the non-written agreement, because that's how things work. So I really can work like that. Like, okay, we need to crunch, right? So we need to ship the stuff. Okay, so today is one of those days. Sag it up, but you know that next week is gonna be chilled, right? So everybody's gonna be chilled. It's gonna be a bit like very relaxed in a way. Or you know what? Thursday I'm not even showing up or whatever, right? So, but that's a sign of a good environment, because I also worked in places where emergency mode, it was every day, right? It was, so if you are always in emergency mode, that's not emergency mode. That's just bad management. That's just that this is not working, right? If we are overworked all the time, we need more people, or I need more interviews.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Because because when we were working with Sasha, we always say the company has problems. I can easily solve my problem. And if we don't want to solve the company's problem, man, my problem, I only have one problem here. I just need to interview with the next startup that is actually in front of the building. Okay, so it's in front, because we were in Berlin, right? I can solve my problem in a day. So that's also the idea of where you work. So if there is a nice environment, crunch time is okay, lifetime balance, it will work, right? Because you can actually talk to people and say, you know what, I can't. I mean, I need a couple of, because I burned out in the past. I mean, Sebastiano knows I burned out like brutally a couple of times, and when I was like, Jesus, because you just get too much stuff on the table, and you want to do more, and then you get a family, and then you get a mortgage, and you're like, okay, let's pick another contract, right? What if they don't renew my contract, and then you end up with 4 contracts at the same time, and because this is gonna kill me, this thing is gonna kill me. And then you have, as you mentioned, you have a partner, and they can be, keep you in check, because maybe you are too close to the tree, you don't see the forest, right? The idea that at some point they say, you know what, this is not working. We miss you, and it gets very dramatic. But that's how it happens, right? So at some point you're like, I like this thing. I have a lot of motivation. I have a lot of reasons to do this. It's for the good, for the family. But then you're actually killing yourself, right? So this won't scale. So it's a fine balance, but it happened organically over time. And at some point, I was like, this is not good. So you see the thing, right? You learn to get the signals from your body, because your body is actually probably the only thing that can tell you. Also gardening. I also do gardening.
I mean, if the amount of times you write me on a message saying, I just want to go and run in the forest and disappear, is any indication you still have that problem?
Oh yeah, I mean, but that's the thing, right? So we have this conversation with my wife all the time. I was like, I'm fed up. I want to fuck everything. Okay, I don't want to do this anymore. And she goes like, even if you take like 3 weeks, let's say you take a sabbatical, okay? Like, after a couple of weeks in the garden, you will end up coding.
Yep.
No matter what, because that's what you do. Okay. So if I leave you, I mean, you can play 200 hours of Red Dead Redemption or whatever but at some point, you're just gonna turn off the PlayStation, turn on the laptop, and start coding, because that's the nature, right? That's what you do. And I was like, fuck, I hate this shit. because that's the actual thing, right? And then you say, and I don't want to do apps anymore. Now I'm rebelling against
You're a
apps.
web person.
Now I'm learning Ruby because 20 years ago at university I learned Rails and I liked it, and I was like, let's do Rails, and I was like, wait, but what's wrong with you? But that's the nature, right? Keep learning things, keep doing things, and you can't help it, but you need to balance it a bit.
We have one more question, which I think is also a good question to bring us back to the out direction from a tech career. So Mark is asking, how long is your screenwriting course, Chet? And do you have a strategy for getting writing gigs afterwards?
Yeah, good couple of questions. So it's a 2-year program. So I started in the fall and it ends a year from June. So I'm in the third of 6 terms right now. And the second question is harder to answer. You would think that I would have a strategy, but it's a difficult career. Like I think the typical pipeline for what I'm doing is you do this in school and you write a bunch of scripts and you basically compile a portfolio to submit to contests or agents or whatever. And then you basically move to LA and you live in your car and you get an unpaid internship fetching coffee for the assistant executive producer of the assistant associate something, right? For some indeterminate amount of time until you know enough people that you can get somebody to read your script, and maybe they'll let you be overworked for very low pay. And like you spend years sort of getting to a position where, oh, I could be on a writing staff of a show. Like that is the typical pipeline, which I think sounds super interesting if I was 24. At this point, I ain't doing that. I don't know if any agents are listening right now. I hope not. I'm not, that's right. So where exactly it leads, like, I think I'm on the path less traveled with it. Which I sort of knew from the beginning, which was I want to do something different. I enjoy doing comedy and writing. So why don't I focus on that for a couple of years? And school seems like a good place to focus on that. If it leads to, writing scripts that people get and I get, am able to do this, great. And if it doesn't, in the meantime, hopefully I'll get more skill just with writing and comedy, and I can go off and write my own stuff, whether it's scripts or books or articles or whatever, or get more into comedy performance, or I don't really know. And to some extent I don't care because I'm having a good time in school taking this very seriously, and I'm learning the storytelling aspects that I wanted to when I came here. I'm learning this new domain of screenwriting, which was completely new to me as of September, and I'm not hyper focused on what am I going to do after this, because for me, to my classmates, it doesn't so much matter. Like if you're 24 years old and you're in an MFA program, you do need to figure out what you're doing with this afterwards. That's not really why I'm here. I'd love to be able to use these skills, but I don't want to do it by fetching coffee for somebody.
Which also sounds like you wouldn't be using them anyway. So
I wouldn't be using skills. Yeah. I mean, it's weird that it's such a relatively mature industry, compared to CS. The screenwriting industry has essentially been around since the 20s at least, the 1920s. And so you would think that there would be like a regular thing, like, well, you join this and then you do that and blah, blah, blah. No, it's all about who you know. And so how everybody gets to the point in their life where they know the right people to read their thing and build up some trust, like it's all very non-deterministic. It just sounds super frustrating.
But that on the other side, there are also different opportunities nowadays. I don't want to say TikTok, but no.
Depends on what country you're in, but yeah.
Oh, ouch. Ouch. But again, I love stand-up comedy, and the moment you start liking things on YouTube Shorts or TikTok or whatever, the algorithm just goes ballistic and feeds you all the stuff. And And I now he's famous, but you know, I was watching his stuff a couple of years ago where he didn't blow up yet. And he was just, you know, just doing his things, recording and publishing on TikTok, and then eventually ended up in an event in Canada where he didn't even want to go, you know, and a friend say, oh, you know, whatever, let's go. And then somebody there recorded a piece of his you know, stand up, and the whole thing blew up, and now it's famous, you know. So you actually never know how this stuff, because nowadays it's incredibly random, you know. You just do your thing because you're enjoying your thing, and maybe somebody just posts a bits of your improv, and for some reason the algorithm picks it up, you know, and then you end up on the late night show, whatever. I mean, that's but I'm curious about the domain. I mean, you say writing for stand-up comedy, for for TV, for books. Do you know already?
I mean, there's different answers depending on like the subtext of your question is why are you doing this? The actual program is screenwriting. So I'm writing movies and I'm writing television shows. Right? Okay. So right now I'm working on the pilot of a show that I had an idea for, and I'm working on the outline of a larger movie that I'll be working on next year for my thesis. And I'm working on the second term, writing the script for a movie that I've been working on since last term. Like you have an original premise, then you basically develop the characters and the ideas, and then you write the script and you submit it, and then it's part of your portfolio. So it's all screenwriting all the time, along with, you know, classes about general writing stuff and some other classes about comedy. So the program is TV and movies, right? And you know, late night TV, more typically Hollywood writers' rooms for, you know, streaming or networks.
Like TV, like drama TV series, like
drama, comedy, whatever. Like I'm here for comedy, as are some of my classmates, but other people are here doing horror or fantasy or sci-fi or drama or action or whatever, right? But it's still the fundamental skills of how do you tell a dramatic story. Even if it's a comedy, you still have a dramatic story underlying it. Otherwise, nobody would stick around after the first 10 minutes, right? You can only drop so many jokes when eventually the audience wants a story out of it. So that's what the program is. What I want to do with it is way more open-ended. Like, you know, stand up would be great if I want to, you know, build up the energy and nerve to try that again. Or improv, probably not as much. Late night TV, maybe, except that means moving to New York, writing more books, writing articles, like all of that, I think is, or figuring out, you know, the TikTok, YouTube shorts thing, and like starting to do my own short form stuff online. Like all of that I think is open. Where I end up, I don't know. I'm a little soaked in actually getting the assignments done right now, but I am trying to think about this in the meantime. Like, yeah, I should probably be pushing my stuff out there and sort of figuring out which direction it could go in.
Last minute question from the chat is, have you considered becoming a video game writer?
I had not. I have a friend from the improv community who was doing video game design, video game writing many years ago. So I knew that was a thing, but no, I hadn't really thought about that. I don't know. Sounds maybe interesting, but I don't really know what that job is like. I'm just, to be honest, writing funny things.
You hear a lot of horror stories from the gaming industry about layoffs and crunch and toxic environment. So
gaming is, I mean, but there is also the indie part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I like at this point, having made the career, the poor financial career decisions that I have, I'm way more interested in finding something that I enjoy doing in a good environment than I am in ending up in a particular domain doing a particular thing. Right. And even if that means I end up working, you know, on my own or with a small group of people doing an indie thing, that would be more fun than ending up in some, you know, crunch thing, because that's the way that industry works. But
allow me one last question, Sebastiano, because I'm curious.
I'm not your supervisor.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yet, the relationship with your colleague students.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to assume your age, but I guess there is like an age gap.
I'm older than 24.
Yeah, no, but jokes aside, is it something similar to what you experienced in our industry, like with youngsters, or this industry is different?
More so. So I don't actually know what the industry is like because I'm not in one of those writers' rooms fetching coffee for somebody.
No, I mean at school. I mean at school, right? You're
at school. So in my program, there's
so silly, sorry, but at grad school, okay.
Yeah, it's it's school. I'm in a screenwriting program that's probably 25 to 30 people overall. And then there's other, side programs, people doing directing and producing and animation and stuff. I know 3 people over the age of 30, and everybody else is essentially 24. Like most people in my program are a year or 2 out of undergrads. And their undergrad, to be fair, they have more experience doing this thing than I do, specifically screenwriting, because a lot of them were doing a film program in undergrad, or they were doing acting, or they were doing, something that's related to this field that they decided to get an MFA in, as opposed to me more doing, general writing and comedy, and now learning screenwriting as so. So more experience, but yeah, definitely a few decades younger. I'm also in classes. Some of the comedy classes are taught. They're cross-listed with undergrads. So I've had undergrads make the comment like, "Oh yeah, last June when I graduated high school," and that's
Jesus Christ.
I'm still kind of getting used to that. Yeah, I was in an advanced comedic storytelling course last term, and there were kids that were 18 years old, like just out of high school. I'm like, I don't know what's advanced about this class environment right now, because I'm pretty sure you didn't do a lot of this in high school. So it's a mix, but it is similar to our domain of CS in that I have always worked with a diverse age range, and the older I got in our industry, the more the skew was toward younger people, just because we keep hiring out of school. So you're kind of aging up toward the top of the curve the entire time. But once people are out of school and working together, I found that to be mostly irrelevant. Like, unless you get into social things where it's like, no, I can't go to the bar right now because, I have a family to get back to for dinner.
Or I can't drink yet because I'm in the US.
Yeah, for example. So there's some social aspects where there would be a difference, but otherwise you're simply colleagues. And I feel there's a similar thing here where we're all doing the same thing. We may be doing it for different reasons at different phases of life, but as long as you're taking the work seriously, it doesn't matter to me. I hope it doesn't matter to them. It is kind of funny though when I'll read things in their scripts that are like pop culture reference that, I like to be totally hip to things, but let's be honest, I was never totally hip to things, and that is only getting worse over time. And so I'm learning things every day where I'm like, yeah, where's that Urban Dictionary again? Because I do not understand what this phrase means.
Now, Chet, this is your golden opportunity to get like hip and up with the times.
Yes. Now I'll be cool, right? Right?
Yes.
Is that what's
exactly.
gonna happen? Sure. Yeah.
Just find out who are the cool kids in the class and hang out with them.
Oh man. Yeah, this was great. Okay, Sebastiano.
Up to you. Do you wanna wrap up?
Yes. Chet, thank you a lot. This was fantastic, and the chat was very active with a lot of nice questions. I want to remind you, everybody, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you want to support us with Amazon Prime, you can for free. You can connect your account to your Twitch account, and you can subscribe to our Twitch channel for free. And maybe you get some sticker in one of our future giveaway.
I have to point out, you showed that pizza thing before. I'm going to say the pizza in Chicago is pretty good. I don't know about that Italian stuff.
I mean, we try.
Yeah.
But yeah, jokes aside, thank you for being with us on this peculiar episode. It was very, very, very funny. And yeah, Sebastiano, what else?
I just want to say we're gonna be off the air for a couple of weeks because next week is Google I/O, and I'm gonna be in the US. Speaking of, if I don't forget to bring them, I will have. If anyone is gonna be at I/O in Mountain View next week, I'm gonna have new stickers, and I'm also gonna have new stickers at KotlinConf. So you're gonna find me at either of those. And then we'll be back at some point. But because it's the lead up to Google I/O, we've been incredibly busy doing work stuff, and we haven't really planned anything for after I/O. So we're going to have to figure things out. So we don't know exactly what we're going to do the next time we're here, but we'll figure it out as we do.
Why would you say that? It's super chill at work lately. Super chill. Super chilled. Oh, it was great. Yes. Thank you again, Chet.
Thank you, Chet. Yeah, it's fun to have these conversations. Like, I obviously did as much opportunity for that as before. I'm hopefully continuing to do the AB podcast. It's a little bit harder for them since I'm remote, but if I can still tune in, that'd be fun. And maybe you'll see me pop up at a tech conference occasionally, because I do miss that part of my life.
Hopefully.
In the meantime, it was fun chatting with you again. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.